My mother carried me for 9 months. She fed me, clothed me, and raised me in the same house as my siblings. But for 30 years, she made sure I never forgot one thing. I was not wanted. And it took me 3 decades to understand why. I woke up before my alarm. For a few seconds, I didn't move. I just lay there on my back in my small Port Harcourt apartment, staring at the ceiling fan as it turned slowly, like it was tired of its own job. Outside, a generator was humming somewhere in the compound. A rooster was shouting like somebody owed it money. The sky outside the thin curtain was just beginning to go from black to grey. It was my mother's 55th birthday. I should have been excited. Instead, my chest felt heavy, like someone had put a stone there while I was sleeping. In my mind, I kept seeing one picture, over and over. My mother, wearing her best lace, standing in the middle of the compound, smiling. Not the tight church smile she gives everybody. A real smile. A smile that reaches her eyes. A smile pointed at me. That was the dream I had been feeding for weeks. Maybe this party, this house renovation, this surprise would finally make her look at me like a mother looks at her first son. Beside me, Adeze turned and placed her hand on my chest. "You are already awake?" she murmured, her voice still sleepy. "I didn't really sleep," I replied. "Because of the party?" "Because of the woman," I said. I didn't need to say which woman. She knew. My mother. I checked my phone, 5:47 a.m. I sat up, rubbing my face. Adeze watched me for a moment. "Come back and sleep small," she said, patting the bed. "It's still early. I need to go and pick the cake and make sure the decorator has reached the house." She didn't argue. She just sat up and leaned against the wall, her big t-shirt sliding down one shoulder. "Are you okay?" she asked. The question hung there. "I don't know," I said honestly. She nodded like she expected that answer. She reached out and pulled me back gently until my back was resting against her chest. She wrapped her arms around me. "It will be fine," she whispered. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that one party could fix 30 years of distance. But that morning, "it will be fine," sounded like a prayer, not a promise. By 9:30 a.m., I was driving slowly down the familiar uneven road to my mother's house in Rumuo, Kowota. From the junction, I could already see balloons and canopies. The decorators' people were tying ribbons to chairs. One small banner with my mother's picture was hanging in front of the house. "Happy 55th birthday, Deaconess Ngozi." They used her church picture, the one where she is holding a microphone, eyes closed, smiling like a woman who has never raised her voice in anger. I parked by the new black and gold iron gate and stepped out of the car. The house looked different. My house, her house, our house. Fresh cream paint on the walls, the gate standing like a security guard, the compound swept clean. This was what my money had done. Months of saving from my banker salary, cutting back on small enjoyment just so I could do something big for her. I was still taking it in when the front door opened. "Big bro," Ada shouted, running toward me in her wrapper and hairnet, face shining with sweat and excitement. She hugged me quickly, then went straight to the car. "You brought the cake?" I said yes now, I said, opening the back door. She bent and whistled. "Chai, see cake oh. Happy birthday, mommy, from your lovely children. A sweet die." "Now your idea," I said. "You be event planner." She laughed. "Don't worry, when I blow, I go charge you for consultation." We carried the cake carefully inside. As we walked through the gate, Ada turned her head and looked around. "Chidi, you try. This house don't change. Mama will faint when she sees everything properly." I smiled, but it didn't reach my chest. "Where is she?" I asked. "In the room," Ada replied, rolling her eyes. "She said she's praying." "Since when?" "Since almost 7. She says she's committing the day into God's hands. You know her?" I did. My mother could talk to God for 1 hour, but with me, 5 minutes always felt like too much. The corridor to her room felt shorter with the new paint and tiles, but my legs felt heavier with each step. Her door was slightly open. I could hear her voice. Father, I thank you for life. Thank you for strength. Thank you that my enemies did not see my end. I knocked gently. Who is that? She asked. It's me, I said. Not Chidi, not your son, just me. Come in, she said. I pushed the door open. Her Bible was open on the bed. Her glasses sat on her nose. She was in a simple wrapper and blouse, scarf tied tightly on her head. When she saw me, she closed the Bible and removed the glasses. You have come, she said. Yes, ma. Our conversations always sounded like that. Proper, respectful, empty. I stayed near the door, suddenly very aware of my height and broad shoulders in that small room. The same room I grew up seeing from a distance, because children in our house did not enter their mother's room anyhow. You are just coming by this time, she said. People will soon start arriving. I went to pick your cake, and I wanted to make sure the decorator came. She nodded once. Thank you. 2 words. No smile. No, you shouldn't have stressed yourself. No, you are trying. Just thank you. I searched her face for something, even a small flash of pride. Nothing. Have you eaten? I asked. She took tea, she said. Should I bring anything from outside? She shook her head. We have things. The room went quiet. I wanted to tell her about the new tiles. I wanted to say, Mommy, do you like the house now? I wanted to stand there like a child holding a drawing and waiting for her mother to say, wow. But my throat felt tight. A memory came, sharp and uninvited. 17-year-old me standing in this same doorway, holding a report card. Mommy, see my result, I said, smiling. I came second in class. She took the paper, looked at it for a few seconds. Where is first position? She asked. In another school, I said, trying to make a joke. She dropped the paper on the table. When you reach first, then you can be smiling like that. That day, something inside me folded. It never fully opened again. Now, at 32, with a new house and a bigger bank account, I felt like that same boy. Mommy, the house, I started. She was already bending to pick up her Bible. Tell Ada to bring my dress. I want to start getting ready. Okay, ma. I stepped out of the room quietly. By noon, the compound was alive. Plastic chairs scraped against the floor. Children ran up and down with balloons, shouting. Women in Ankara wrapper moved in and out of the kitchen, lifting pot covers, tasting stew, arguing about salt. The DJ sat under a small canopy with his speakers, playing soft gospel songs as warm-up. I moved around, checking small things, making sure the drinks were in the right cooler, confirming the photographer had arrived, nodding, smiling, shaking hands. Ah, Banky, one uncle said, slapping my back. You are trying, oh. See as you change your mama house. God will bless you. Amen, sir, I replied. Another uncle waved at the house. From this Port Harcourt house now, we go soon hear that you buy house in Lekki. I laughed politely. We dey manage, sir. If you looked at us from outside, you would think we were one big happy family. No cracks, no hidden wounds. Emeka and Ifeanyi arrived with drinks, sweating and arguing as usual. Big bro, Emeka called. These people almost cheated us, so they changed the price when we reached there. Typical, I said, helping them unload. We joked, we laughed, we shouted at the boys who were trying to steal drinks. But even in the middle of that noise, I could feel it. We were not all the same distance from the center. Ada, very close to her mother. The boys, somewhere in the middle. Me? I had always been the one on the farthest orbit. Around 2 p.m., the compound paused. My mother stepped out of the house. The blue lace wrapper and blouse fit her perfectly. The gold embroidery caught the sunlight. Her gele sat like a small crown on her head. Her skin was glowing with that quiet, seasoned beauty some women carry after surviving many storms. "Dickiness!" the women shouted. "Fine woman! See as you are shining!" She smiled, hugged them, held hands, gave side kisses. She knew how to be warm in public. She knew how to be mommy to everybody. Ada ran to her immediately and hugged her. "Mommy, happy birthday!" she shouted. "You look fine, die!" My mother patted her back. "My Ada," she said, smiling. The photographer lifted his camera. "Mama, stand with your children," he said happily. "Let us take family picture." We all moved closer. Ada stood on her right. Ifeanyi and Emeka quickly took the left side, jostling playfully. I stepped in beside Ada. "Shift small," my mother said. I froze. "Ma?" "Shift small," she repeated, guiding Ada even closer to her side. I moved back half a step. The photographer snapped the picture. Later, when I saw it, it looked like I was an extra, like somebody's cousin who mistakenly entered the frame. The MC, a loud man in a shiny suit, took the microphone and began. "Ladies and gentlemen, if you are happy to be here, shout hallelujah." "Hallelujah," the crowd responded. He hyped my mother, called her woman of God, prayer warrior, mother in Israel. Then he said, "We will now invite the children to say something about their mother. First of all, the first son, our banker, our big man, Brother Chidi, please come forward." People clapped. I stood up slowly. As I walked forward, I could feel every eye on me. Some people had watched me grow up in this same compound. Some used to send me on errands with 10 naira. Now they were calling me our banker. I took the microphone. "Good afternoon, everyone," I began. "Good afternoon," they chorused. I looked at my mother. She sat there in her royal blue lace, eyes on me, face calm. I swallowed. "Today is special," I said. "We are here to celebrate a woman that has seen a lot in this life." I talked about her sacrifices, how she sold tomatoes and pepper, how she refused to be admitted in hospital, even when sick because she had children to feed, how she woke up early to pray. My voice sounded steady in the microphone, but inside, another voice was speaking. "She didn't come for visiting day. She never helped you with homework. She forgot your birthday in SS1. She has never said, 'I am proud of you.'" I pushed that voice away and continued. "This house you are sitting in," I said, "is just a small way to say thank you, Mama. You deserve more, and by God's grace, you will see more." People clapped loudly. The MC shouted, "Correct, son. Clap again for him." I handed him the microphone and walked back to my seat. As I sat, I looked straight at my mother's face. I was searching for something, a smile that was just for me, a small nod, a tear in her eye, something, anything. Her face remained the same, calm, closed. Ada went next. She took the microphone and started with a joke. "If you know she can shout," she said. The compound erupted in, "Know my mother, you," laughter. My mother herself laughed. "But if she loves you, she will finish you with care," Ada added, smiling at her. My mother pressed her wrapper to her chest, laughing shyly like a young girl. Ada continued, talking about standing in the kitchen with Mama, learning how to cook, how they would gist while stirring pot, how Mama would hide small meat for her even after shouting in front of everybody. "You see this woman," Ada said, voice shaking slightly. "If I come to this world 10 times, I will still choose her as my mother." My mother's eyes filled with tears. When Ada finished, my mother stood up, opened her arms wide and hugged her tightly. The camera flashed. The crowd clapped and awed. Something stung behind my eyes, but I blinked it back. Emeka and Ifeanyi followed. They turned their speeches into comedy, talking about how she chased them with broom when they refused to go to church, how she called them pet names when she needed something done. "My baby boy," she would call Ifeanyi. "My stubborn son," she would call Emeka, laughing. The crowd was entertained, throwing in comments and laughter. My mother laughed loudly, clapping her hands. To everybody watching, it was a beautiful moment between mother and children. To me, it felt like watching a movie I didn't act in. Finally, it was my mother's turn. The MC handed her the microphone and almost knelt. "Mommy, mommy, mommy, talk to us," he shouted. She stood slowly. "Praise the Lord," she said into the microphone. "Hallelujah," the crowd responded. She started by thanking God, thanking Him for life, for strength, for delivering her from sickness, for keeping her children. She told a short story about almost dying while giving birth to one of my brothers. People murmured Jesus and "Hey, yeah." Then she began to thank people. She thanked the church. She thanked her women's fellowship. She thanked the MC. She thanked the decorator. She thanked the DJ. She thanked my late father's relatives for coming. She thanked Ada for organizing everything. She thanked Emeka and Ifeanyi for their support. She thanked almost everybody whose shadow entered that compound. I sat there waiting. She mentioned the house too. "God has beautified my life," she said, lifting one hand. "He moved me from old to new. See this house. See what the Lord has done." "Amen," the crowd shouted. I waited for my name. "Thank you to my first son. Thank you to Chidi, who renovated the house. Thank you to the child God used." Nothing. Not one word. Not even my first child. Just a general, "my children." As she continued talking, the sound around me started to blur. The gospel music, the DJ's ad-libs, the claps, the murmurs, they all became distant. As my mother talked and thanked and testified, my mind left the compound. I was 6 years old again, standing by the school gates on visiting day, watching other parents carry cooler and drinks to their children. I waited and waited until the bell rang and visiting time ended. That day, my mother didn't come. She said later that she forgot. I pretended it was fine. I was 12 again, standing in the parlor with my report card, heart beating. "Mommy, I came third," I had said. She replied, not looking up from her plate. "Next time, try and do better." No smile. No, "well done." I was 15, lying on the bed with malaria, sweating, weak. She dropped the medicine on the table. "Take it," she said. "You will be fine." That same week, my younger brother had a small cough. She sat by his bed all night. I was 25, working long hours at the bank, sending almost half my salary home every month. She would reply with the same message, "God bless you." No call, no questions, no, "How are you coping?" Sitting at her birthday, listening to her thank everybody except me, all those memories rose like a tide. For years, I had defended her. I told myself, African mothers are not expressive. They don't say, "I love you." I told myself she was strict because I was the firstborn, that she was training me to be strong. But watching her cry and hug Ada, laugh with the boys, thank the world, celebrate everyone, and then jump clean over my name, something inside me finally snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, like glass that has been slowly cracking for years, finally giving way. Under the table, Ada's hand slid into mine and squeezed. "Chidi," she whispered, "are you okay?" I swallowed. "I'm fine," I lied. My mother ended her speech with, "May God bless all of you. May you all celebrate your children like this, in Jesus' name." "Amen," the crowd shouted. My lips did not move, because the only sentence bouncing around my skull was, "My own mother doesn't see me." The party ended the way most Nigerian parties end. People left in groups, carrying takeaway coolers and nylon bags. The DJ changed from gospel to Afrobeats as the crowd thinned.
Women packed plates. Men argued about politics near the gate. I moved through all of it like a ghost. I smiled where I was supposed to smile. I nodded where I was supposed to nod. I hugged when arms opened. But inside, I was somewhere else. When everything finally calmed down, Adeze found me near the back of the house, pretending to be busy with the remaining drinks. "Let's go," she said quietly. "You are tired." We said quick goodbyes, promised to check on people, and walked to the car. The compound lights cast long shadows on the ground. My mother was on the veranda talking with two church women. I looked up once, hoping her eyes would meet mine. They didn't. She glanced in my direction, then continued her conversation like I was one of the boys packing chairs. I unlocked the car. Adeze got into the passenger seat. I sat behind the wheel and closed my door. For a moment, we just sat there in silence. The only sound was the faint music still playing at the back of the house. I put the key in the ignition, but didn't start the engine. Adeze looked straight ahead. "Chidi," she said softly, "talk to me." "There's nothing to talk about," I said. "Don't do that," she replied, "not today." Her voice was calm, but there was an edge in it. I laughed once, a short, dry sound. I saw it, everybody saw it. She thanked the MC, the decorator, church members, neighbors, the dead, the living, but not the sun that changed her house. Adeze turned to face me fully. "From the moment you finished your speech," Ade, she said, "I was watching her. I thought maybe she was just shy. Maybe she doesn't know how to show emotion in public. But when Ada spoke, when your brother spoke, look at how she reacted." I didn't want to remember, but the images were already there. My mother's tears, her laughter, her hugs, all of them for them. And when she said, "See what the Lord has done," and skipped your name, Adeze continued, "Chidi, that was not normal." "Maybe it's just her way," I said weakly. "She's old school, firstborns." "Stop," Adeze cut in. "Stop hiding behind that firstborn story. This is not discipline. This is not culture. This is not African mother." She shook her head slowly. "This is rejection." The word hung between us like smoke. Rejection. I swallowed. My hand tightened on the steering wheel. "I've been thinking about it all day," she said, "and there's only one question that keeps coming to my mind." I didn't ask, but she said it anyway. "What exactly did you do to her?" The question stung because it sounded like the one I had been asking myself for as long as I could remember. What did I do? What did I say? What mistake did I make as a baby, as a child, as a teenager, that made my own mother hold me at arm's length for 30 years? "I don't know," I said. "I honestly don't know." Adeze sighed. She reached out and placed her hand on mine. "You've been trying to earn something that should have been given freely," she said. "How long do you want to keep trying?" I turned the key and started the engine. "I don't know," I repeated, "but I'm tired." The road from Rumokuta back to my place felt longer that night. Street lights came and went in patches. Some corners were bright, others were swallowed by darkness. Adeze rested her head on the window, watching houses blur past. I drove in silence. At one point, she spoke without looking at me. "Do you remember what you told me when we first started dating?" she asked. "When we talked about your family?" I frowned. "Which one?" "You told me your mother was just strict," she said. "You said she didn't hug, she didn't praise, but she loved you in her own way." I remembered that conversation. We had been on the phone late at night. I had described my mother as a typical Nigerian mom. No nonsense, disciplined, prayerful. I edited the story carefully, leaving out the parts that felt too raw. "I believed you," Adeze went on. "I told myself, maybe he's just sensitive. Maybe he takes things too personal." "What about now?" I asked quietly. She turned to face me. Her eyes were full, but not with pity, with anger.
Now I've seen it with my eyes, she said. This is not in your head. We stopped at a red light. I stared at the traffic signal, waiting for it to change, wishing life could be that simple. Red, stop. Green, go. Yellow, get ready. If only there was a light for when to give up on a parent. Chidi, she said softly, make me a promise. My chest tightened. What kind of promise? Promise me you won't keep killing yourself to get what she refuses to give. Promise me you won't spend your whole life trying to prove you deserve her love. The light turned green. I pressed the accelerator. I hear you, I said. That's not a promise, she replied. I didn't answer, because in that moment, I didn't know which was heavier, staying and trying or letting go.
That night, after we got home and Adeze finally slept, I lay on my back in the dark, eyes wide open. The fan above me turned slowly again, just like in the morning. But this time, instead of imagining a smile that never came, my mind went far back to one specific day that had been trying to resurface all evening. I must have been 8, primary 3. We had just closed from school on a Friday. The sun was hot. The dust on the road was rising with every step. I carried my small backpack and walked the familiar path home. When I entered our compound, I saw my siblings under the mango tree. Ada was eating biscuits and laughing. Emeka and Ifeanyi were playing 10-10 with some kids from the next compound. On the table beside them were 2 plates of jollof rice with chicken bones and empty sachet drinks. Where is mine? I asked. Ada licked her fingers and shrugged. Mommy said there were only 2 plates, she replied. She said we should share. With who? I asked. With ourselves now, she said. You are still in school. I felt something sharp in my throat, but I swallowed it down. Where is Mommy? I asked. She's inside, sleeping. I went into the house, dropped my bag in the corner, and walked to the bedroom. I stood at the door, staring at the curtain. I wanted to wake her and ask, Mommy, what about my own food? But in our house, children didn't wake parents for small things. And something in me already knew the answer. I went back outside, picked one of the chicken bones from the table, and sucked what was left on it. That day, I learned how to fill my stomach with leftovers and my heart with excuses. She was tired. She didn't remember. Next time will be different. Years passed. The scenes changed. School, church, university, work. But the pattern remained. If 3 blessings were in the room, my own portion usually went to someone else, even at home, especially at home.
The next day, my phone started ringing early. Ada. I ignored the first call. She called again and again. By the 4th time, I picked. Big bro, why are you acting like that? She asked without greeting. Are you angry with me? I sighed. Why will I be angry with you? You just left like that yesterday, she said. You didn't even stay till evening. People were asking for you. I was tired, I replied. Is it because of what happened during the speech? She asked. My silence was the answer. Chidi, she said gently, you know how Mommy is. I closed my eyes. There it was again. You know how she is. She's not good with words, Ada continued. She's always been like that. She didn't mention your name, but you know she appreciates you. Does she? I asked quietly. Yes, now, she said quickly. Look at everything you've done. Look at how she looked around the house. She was just overwhelmed. She looked around the house, I said. But did she look at me? Ada went quiet. Ada, I said. Did you hear her thank everybody one by one? Yes, she whispered. Did you hear my name? She took a breath. No. We stayed on the line, the silence between us stretching. But that doesn't mean she hates you, Ada rushed to add. Maybe she just forgot. Maybe she was nervous. Ada, I said, if she can remember the decorator, the MC, the DJ, my father's cousin from the village, how is it my name she forgot? Ada didn't have an answer. A few minutes later, Emeka called. Guy, why you vex leave yesterday? He asked in his usual playful tone.
You fall my hand though. People were asking of our big banker. I had work, I lied. He laughed. Work, eh? On Saturday? He kept joking until his voice softened. Look, about Mama not mentioning you, you know how she is. Firstborn, would they hear their own praise like that? Abi, you want her to now kneel down and start worshipping you because you put tiles? I didn't say she should worship me, I replied. I just thought, I don't know what I thought. Omo, forget Jari. She loves you. She was just what? Just being herself, he finished lamely. That phrase again, just being herself. Sometimes being yourself can be a weapon other people have to survive.
Over the next week, life continued. I went to work, I attended meetings, I smiled at customers, I wore my tie and greeted security guards at the bank gate. From the outside, nothing had changed, but inside, something had shifted permanently. Before the birthday, I used to call my mother almost every Sunday evening. It was a habit I forced on myself. Good evening, ma. How are you? Fine, ma. How was church? Fine, ma. 2-3 minutes. Safe topics, no emotions. Sometimes she would end the call with remember to pray or take care of yourself. Not I miss you, not I'm proud of you, just instructions. The Sunday after her birthday, my phone reminded me, call mommy. I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over the dial button, then moved away. I put the phone down. I told myself I would call later. Later became night. Night became tomorrow. Tomorrow became next Sunday. Next Sunday came. I didn't call. A strange thing happened. She did not call either. Days passed. Weeks. No, Chidi, I haven't heard from you. No, are you okay? No, is everything all right? The woman who could pray for 1 hour straight didn't have 5 minutes to check on the son who had gone silent. Ada called once and said, Mommy asked of you. But even the way she said it sounded weak, like she was trying to convince herself. She said, how is he? Ada reported. I told her you are fine. Did she ask why I haven't called? I asked. Ada hesitated. No, she just nodded. That was the day I stopped telling myself it was in my head. It wasn't. There are people you can disappear from and they will turn heaven and earth to find you. And there are people you can disappear from and they will sleep better at night. I didn't make any big announcement. I didn't swear to cut her off completely. I didn't block her number. I just stopped going out of my way. I stopped forcing conversations that felt like small punishments. I stopped begging for crumbs from a table I helped support. For the first time in my life, I allowed myself to accept a hard truth. My mother carried me for 9 months, but if my existence made her uncomfortable, she was not going to fight to hold on to me. So, maybe, for my own sanity, I needed to learn how to let go.
I was not expecting her that day. It was a Thursday evening. Rain had just finished falling in Port Harcourt, so the air outside was cool, but my small sitting room felt stuffy. I had just removed my tie and dropped on the sofa when I heard the knock. 3 sharp knocks. Not landlord, not neighbor, family. I opened the door and saw Ada standing there with a nylon bag and a serious face. You didn't tell me you were coming, I said. If I told you, you might say I'm not around, she replied, brushing past me into the room. I closed the door and turned. She looked around like she was searching for evidence of something. Then she dropped the nylon bag on the table. I brought soup, okra, before you die on top Indomie. I smiled slightly. Thank you, Madam Ketra. She didn't smile back. She sat down and stared at the TV, which was off. Chidi, she said quietly, are you avoiding home because of the birthday? Straight to the point, that was Ada. I've been busy, I said. She gave me the look older sisters give little children when they lie, forgetting that she's younger than me. You've always been busy, she said, but you still used to come. Every Sunday, if not in person, at least on video call. Now it's like you changed address. I sat opposite her. Why did you really come, Ada? She took a deep breath. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. I nodded, my throat already tightening.
Do you think mommy hates you? The question dropped in the room like something heavy. I could have done what I usually do. Laugh it off. Say, hate K. Say, she's just strict. But I was tired of defending pain. Yes, I said slowly. Ada, I think she does. She closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, they were already wet. Why? She whispered. What did you do? That was the problem. I had no answer. Ada leaned back on the sofa and covered her face with both hands. I feel like a wicked person, she said. For what? I asked. For enjoying the love you didn't get. Her voice broke on the last word. Ada, it's not your fault, I said quickly. Maybe it's not my fault, but it is my reality, she replied. When something good happens to me, she is the first person I want to tell. When something good happens to you, you are the one calling her. She shook her head. When I finished NYSC and got my first job, she danced with me in the parlor. That evening, she made jollof and even bought malt. I remember that day. We had all eaten the rice. I had told Ada congratulations and teased her that she should now be sending us recharge card. I also remember the day I got my bank job. I called my mother. She said, okay, God is faithful. That was it. No dance, no rice, no malt. It's like we have two different mothers, Ada said. The one I know and the one you know. She wiped her eyes. I've been telling myself you exaggerate, she said. That you are sensitive, that maybe you expect too much. But after that birthday, she exhaled, long and tired. I cannot lie to myself again. We sat in silence for a while. Ada, I said finally, have you ever asked her? Asked her what? Why she treats me like that? Ada shook her head quickly. You know I can't, she said. In our house, you don't just ask your mother, why are you like this? We are not Oyimbo. I smiled sadly. So we just continue like this? She stared at me. Do you want to continue like this? I didn't answer. Because I didn't know.
2 days later, Ada called me. Big bro, I've been thinking, she said. If I cannot ask mommy directly, I can ask people who knew her before us. Which people? I asked. Uncle Obiora, Auntie Nkem, Mama's old neighbors, people that were there before marriage, before children, before everything. Ada, leave it, I said. What will it change? I don't know, she replied, but not knowing is choking me. I tried to talk her out of it, but when Ada's mind is made up, you can only stand aside and watch. She started with the aunties. Later, she told me how it went.
She went to see Auntie Nkem first. One of those aunties that calls everybody my dear and wears wrapper tied high above her chest. They sat in the veranda. Auntie, I want to ask you something about mommy, Ada said. Auntie Nkem laughed. Your mother that used to flog me when we were small? Ask, my dear. Ada didn't waste time. Has she always been distant? She asked, especially with Chidi. Auntie Nkem's smile faded small. Why are you asking? She said. Because I grew up feeling like something was wrong, Ada replied. I want to understand. Auntie shifted in her chair. Your mother has suffered, she said finally. If you know half of what that woman has been through, you would just be praying for her. What did she go through? Ada asked quickly. Auntie shook her head. Adult matter. You young people like to open old wounds. Leave it. Auntie, please, Ada begged. Is it something she did? Something Chidi did? Chidi, Auntie said sharply. No, Chidi is a good boy, quiet, respectful. Now from your mother body the problem starts. Ada's heart jumped. What problem? Auntie caught herself. I didn't say anything, oh, she said, standing up. Ask your mother. If she wants to talk, she will talk. She didn't. The same thing happened with other older women. They would start with, your mother has suffered, and end with, it's not my mouth they will use to scatter another person's home. The more they refused to talk, the more Ada knew there was a story. It was a Tuesday evening when my phone rang and Ada's name flashed on the screen again. Where are you? She asked before I could greet. Just closing from work, I said. Why? Can you come to UPTH? She asked. Uncle Obiora is there. He wants to see us. My stomach tightened. Mama's brother? I asked. Yes, he's not fine. He said he wants to talk to us together. I didn't ask further questions. In our culture, when an old man in hospital says, "Call the children, I want to talk," it means one of two things: blessing or confession. Sometimes both. I'll meet you there, I said. The smell of the hospital hit me before the sight did. That mixture of antiseptic, urine, and something heavy you cannot name. Ada was at the reception when I arrived. She looked tired. They said he's in Ward C, she said. Let's go. We walked down a long corridor together, our footsteps echoing on the tiles. We found his bed near the window. He looked smaller than I remembered. Once he had been a tall, loud man who filled a room with his presence. Now he was a thin frame under white sheets, his once booming voice reduced to a rough whisper. Good evening, sir, I greeted. Uncle, Ada said softly. He turned his head slowly and squinted, then smiled weakly. Ah, my children. Chidi, Ada, you came. Of course, Ada replied, moving closer. They said you wanted to see us. He nodded, then coughed. The cough seemed to shake his whole body. Ada poured water and lifted the cup to his lips. He sipped, then lay back. I don't have strength to talk too much, so I will go straight to the point. He looked at me first. Chidi, he said, you know your mother loves you, Abi? I did not answer, because I was tired of that sentence. He studied my face for a few seconds and then sighed. Okay, he said, let me not start with lie. Your mother has a wound she never allowed to heal, and you are the scar. Ada's hand tightened around the bed rail. Uncle, please, she said. We've been living with confusion for too long. Just tell us the truth. He stared at the ceiling for a moment, as if asking God for permission. Then he began. Before any of you were born, he said slowly, your mother was engaged to another man. His name rolled out like something sacred. Dubem. I had never heard that name in my entire life. He was from a good family in Owerri, Uncle continued, educated, working in a bank. Your grandfather was proud. Your grandmother too. They said, our daughter has found a husband that would change our story. Ada and I exchanged glances. Uncle smiled faintly. Your mother was happy, he said. She used to sing around the house. She wore the engagement ring like it was glued to her finger. The fixed date. Cloth was chosen. Bride price list was ready. He coughed again. Ada wiped his mouth gently. There was another man too, he said. Your father, Emeka. I stiffened. He was always around, helping in the shop, carrying load, fixing things. Poor but hard-working. And he liked your mother, we all knew. He would look at her with eyes that had too much hope for his pocket. A sad smile crossed his face. But your mother's eyes were on Dubem. Big man, fine car, clean shirt. That was the level. So how did she end up with Daddy? I asked, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. Uncle looked at me, and his eyes softened with something that looked like pity. That is the night that changed everything, he said quietly. It took a deep breath. There was a wedding in the village, he said. A relative. Many people came. Your mother came from town. Dudan was supposed to come, but he said work held him. He paused. Your father was there, he added. Of course, he was always around where your mother was. I didn't like how he was saying, your father, like the title didn't fit properly. After the wedding, there was dancing, he said, music, drinks, noise. You know how village wedding can be. Your mother was not a drinker, but that night, he looked at Ada,
That night, some people made sure her cup was never empty. Who? I asked. He hesitated. Uncle, please, Ada urged. Say it. We are not children anymore. He closed his eyes briefly, then opened them. Emeka, he said. The room went colder. Your father, he continued, was angry. I didn't know at first. He kept smiling, but I could see it. The way he watched her laugh with friends, the way he looked when people mentioned Dubem's name. Jealousy is a dangerous spirit. The monitor beside the bed beeped softly. Later in the night, people started going home, he said. Your mother was not herself. Her eyes were red. Her steps were not straight. I told your father to take her home safely. He stopped talking. Ada's eyes were wide. What happened? She whispered. Uncle swallowed. What happened that night was not marriage, he said slowly. It was not love. It was not agreement. It was something he forced. The word he didn't say hung there anyway. Rape. My chest felt tight. He looked at me. Your father loved your mother, but love without self-control is wickedness. The ceiling fan hummed above us, struggling against the heat. Your mother didn't tell us immediately, he continued. It was weeks later. Time passed, then her stomach started to grow. When your grandparents found out she was pregnant, Uncle said, there was war in that house. I could imagine it. Voices raised, accusations thrown, tears. Dubem came, he continued. Your mother told him everything. She thought he would understand, that he would say, it was not your fault. He shook his head. Instead, he ended the engagement, he said. He said he could not marry a woman carrying another man's child. He said it didn't matter how it happened. He walked away. Ada covered her mouth with her hand. Your mother's world ended that day, he said. Your father's own began. The family forced her to marry him, I said quietly. Uncle nodded. Your grandfather said, he is the one that did it, let him carry his load, he explained. They called elders, they called pastor, they called everybody. Before your mother could breathe, they had fixed a new date, not for the wedding she dreamed of, but for the wedding she endured. He looked at me. You were at that wedding, he said, inside her. My mouth went dry. Uncle shifted on the bed, grimacing with pain. From that moment, he said, everything changed between her and your father. She never really forgave him. She obeyed God, she obeyed culture, she obeyed family, but her heart, he tapped his chest weakly. Her heart remained in that room on that night. He looked tired, but there was something desperate in his eyes, like he needed to finish this before his strength finished. When you were born, he said, they expected that motherhood would soften her. You know how people say, once you see the child, you will forget the pain? He gave a small, sad laugh that turned into a cough. But every time she looked at you, he said, she saw two things. The man that forced himself on her and the life she lost with the man she chose. Silence pressed down on us. You were innocent, he added quickly. Don't ever forget that. You did nothing wrong. But pain doesn't know how to separate souls. Sometimes it just attaches itself to whatever is closest. He closed his eyes for a second, then opened them again. She took care of you, he said. She fed you, bathed you, sent you to school. But there was a part of her that refused to open to you, because opening to you meant revisiting that night. My breath felt shallow. So what you are saying, I asked slowly, is that I am a reminder? He nodded, tears forming in his old eyes. A living reminder, he said, a scar she had to greet every morning.
Ada was crying openly now. All these years, she said, we've been telling him, you know how mommy is. We've been telling him she loves you just differently. Meanwhile, this is what she was carrying. Uncle looked at her with regret.
I wanted to talk before, he said, many times, but your mother begged me not to. She said, if they know, they will hate their father. If they know, they will hate me. Let them just think I am wicked. I can carry that one. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. But I am dying, he said simply. I don't want to carry this thing to the grave. You people are already carrying confusion. At least, let the confusion have name. He turned to me again. Chidi, he said, voice low. Your mother doesn't hate you. She hates the story that brought you. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. It didn't make it hurt any less. If anything, it hurt more. Because now there was a reason. Not a good reason, not a fair reason, but a reason.
Ada was crying openly now. All these years, she said, we've been telling him you know how mommy is. We've been telling him she loves you, just differently. Meanwhile, this is what she was carrying. Uncle looked at her with regret. I wanted to talk before, he said, many times, but your mother begged me not to. She said, if they know, they will hate their father. If they know, they will hate me. Let them just think I am wicked. I can carry that one. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. But I am dying, he said simply. I don't want to carry this thing to the grave. You people are already carrying confusion. At least let the confusion have name. He turned to me again. Chidi, he said voice low, your mother doesn't hate you. She hates the story that brought you. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. It didn't make it hurt any less. If anything, it hurt more. Because now there was a reason. Not a good reason. Not a fair reason. But a reason.
For 3 days, Ada didn't call me. Normally, if something heavy happened, she would be in my phone morning and night, sending voice notes, cracking small jokes to ease tension. This time, silence. On the 4th evening, I called her. She picked on the 2nd ring. Ada, you've disappeared, I said, trying to sound light. I've been thinking, she replied. About what? About whether to destroy you or set you free. Her words hit me like cold water. What does that mean? I asked. She sighed. Since we left the hospital, she said, I've been carrying that story like hot coal. If I keep it, it will burn my hand. If I drop it in your lap, it will burn yours too. I understood what she meant. You don't have to protect me from truth, I said quietly. Lie is what has been killing me slowly. She went quiet for a moment. Can you come to my house tomorrow? She asked. Evening, after work. I'll be there, I said. Come alone, she added. I don't want noise. I don't want anybody to say, don't say this, don't say that. All right. When we ended the call, I sat in the dark for a long time. Before the hospital, I had been living with a question. Now I knew there was an answer. And answers are sometimes more dangerous than questions.
Ada lived in Elelengwa, in a small 2-bedroom flat with a tiny balcony that faced the street. I got there just before sunset. The sky was painted with those Port Harcourt colors, grey, orange, and a dirty blue fighting for space. She opened the door before I could knock twice. Come in, she said, stepping aside. The sitting room light was off. Only a small lamp near the corner was on, casting a warm, dim glow. Why are you sitting in darkness? I tried to joke. PHCN has taught me how to enjoy small light, she said. We sat down, she on the single chair, me on the sofa. On the table, there was a half-finished plate of food she clearly had not been eating. She stared at her own fingers for a while, twisting them. I don't know how to start, she said. Start from anywhere, I replied. I've already reached here. She took a deep breath, like someone about to dive into cold water. Chidi, she said, everything you have been feeling, everything you have been suspecting, you were not mad, you were not imagining it. She looked up at me, eyes shiny. Mommy is carrying something, she said, and you are the one she has been using to hold it. Ada began from the beginning. From Dubem, from the engagement, from the joy in the family, from the wedding in the village, from the drinks, from our father's jealousy. As she spoke,
I realized she was repeating almost exactly what Uncle Obira had said, but with her own voice, her own emotion wrapped around it. When she reached the night of the wedding, her voice changed. She trusted him as a family friend, she said. She was drunk, yes, but she didn't invite what he did. He took advantage of her weakness. She didn't say the word either. She didn't need to. I felt my jaw clench. She thought she could still marry Dubem, Ada continued. She thought if she explained, he would understand, that he would say, I will stand by you. But he left, I said, my voice cold. Ada nodded slowly. His family said their son cannot marry somebody who is not clean, she said bitterly. They didn't care how it happened. They just cut her off. The picture was forming in my head. Too clear. She lost everything in one sweep, Ada said. The man she loved, the future she planned, the respect in the village. She swallowed. And the person she was forced to face every day after that, she added, looking straight at me, was the man who caused it and the child that came from it. Silence. Heavy, choking silence.
Do you remember when you asked her, Mommy, do I look like you or Daddy? Ada asked suddenly. The memory flashed instantly. Small me, standing in the corridor. Her looking at my face too long. Her saying, you look like yourself. She couldn't say you look like Daddy because seeing his face on you is the hardest part. My hands were cold. All the little things started lining up like soldiers. Her flinch when I smiled a certain way. The way her eyes would sometimes stop on my face and then quickly look away. The way she refused to take solo pictures with me but would happily pose with all of us together. She did the physical things she was supposed to do, Ada said. She cooked, she paid school fees with Daddy, she bought you uniforms, she prayed for her children. But opening her heart to you, that door remained locked. Because opening to me meant opening that night again, I said. Yes. I let the words sit. So that was it. It wasn't that I was lazy. It wasn't that I was disrespectful. It wasn't that I was too soft or too stubborn or not man enough. I was a symbol, a breathing souvenir of somebody else's sin.
For the first time since she started talking, anger rose in me like heat. So all my life, I said slowly, I have been paying for a crime I didn't commit. Ada's lip trembled. Chidi. No, say it, I cut in. She couldn't punish him properly, so she punished me. She couldn't say, I hate you to the man, so she said it with her eyes to the sun. Chidi, it's deeper than that, Ada tried. I know she was hot, I snapped. I know she was broken, but I was a child, Ada, an innocent child. The lamp in the corner buzzed softly. Do you know what it means to grow up thinking something is wrong with you? I said. To think if I try harder, maybe she will see me. To keep climbing a ladder that is leaning on the wrong wall. Ada began to cry quietly. I have been trying to be a good son, I continued, sending money, coming home, calling her, trying to impress her with job, with house, with this stupid birthday party. My voice cracked. And the whole time, the real problem had nothing to do with me, I whispered. It started before I even took my first breath. I stood up and paced the small room. She could have gotten help, I said. She could have talked to somebody, a pastor, a therapist, an elder. She could have decided, I will not put this on my child. I stopped and faced Ada. But she didn't, I said. She let it grow, she fed it, and she hid behind prayer and respect and culture while I was starving for basic affection. Ada wiped her face with the back of her hand. You are right, she said softly. There is no excuse for making a child carry that weight. Her agreement didn't calm me. If anything, it made the anger feel more real. Because when you are the only one complaining, you can convince yourself you are dramatic. But when someone else finally says, no, you were wronged, the wound cries louder.
After a while, the anger started to cool, leaving something else behind. Not peace, not acceptance, an ache. I sat back down slowly. So what now? I asked.
What am I supposed to do with this information? Hug her and say, Mommy, sorry, continue? Ada shook her head. I don't know, she admitted. Part of me wants to protect her. Another part wants to shout at her. Another part wants to hold both of you and just cry. She looked at me. I know you are angry, she said. You have every right, but I also know she is not a monster. She is a broken human being who made broken choices that broke her child. I leaned my head back and closed my eyes. The problem with understanding is that it drags compassion into the room, even when you want to sit alone with your rage. I don't want her to be the villain, I said quietly, but I am tired of being the sacrifice. We sat like that for a long time. No TV, no music, just breathing and occasional sniffing. Outside, someone passed by shouting, "Pure water!" like life had not just shifted inside a small flat in Elelewo.
Ada spoke first. Do you want to talk to her? She asked, face to face. The thought alone made my pulse quicken. What will I say? I asked. Will I sit down and tell my mother, I heard you were raped, that's why you hate me? Is that conversation not heavy enough to break a house in two? If you don't talk, you will still break, Ada replied, just quietly on the inside. She was right. Silence had not protected me all these years. It had only protected the lie. I don't even know if she will admit it, I said. If I bring it up, she might deny, she might attack, she might say, who told you? Why are you digging what God has covered? Ada nodded. She might. Then what is the point? I asked. The point, she said slowly, is that you deserve to speak your truth in front of the person who helped shape your pain. Whether she accepts it or not is not your responsibility. I looked at her. You think I'm strong enough for that? I asked. I think you're already carrying worse, she said. At least this way, you won't be carrying it alone in your head. You would have released some of it into the air. Her words settled on me like a heavy blanket. I'm scared, I admitted. She smiled sadly. If you weren't, I would worry about you.
On my way home that night, the streets felt different. The same buildings, the same potholes, the same kiosks with recharge card here faded on the front. But I was not the same person that had driven to Ada's house earlier. Now, I was a man who knew why his mother's eyes had always been cold. Pain had a name, rejection had a history, and my existence had a backstory I didn't ask for. In the silence of the car, a thought came that I didn't push away this time. You have a right to confront her. Not to insult, not to disgrace, but to stand in front of her as a man now, not as a begging boy, and say, this is what you did to me. This is what your silence did. This is how your wound wounded me. By the time I got home, the decision was sitting quietly in my chest. I took off my tie, dropped my bag, and sat on the edge of my bed. I picked up my phone, opened my mother's contact, and looked at her name. Mommy. My thumb hovered over the call button. Not yet. If this conversation was going to happen, it couldn't be on the phone. The next time I saw her, it would not be for a birthday or a church program or one rushed Sunday visit. It would be for the first honest conversation of my life. I put the phone down and whispered into the empty room. God, give me strength to face the woman who gave me life and the part of her that took mine. Outside, somewhere in the compound, a baby cried, and for the first time, instead of feeling like a child begging for love, I felt like a man preparing to demand the respect his heart deserved.
The days between my decision and the actual confrontation felt like standing on a bridge that was already shaking. I went to work. I answered emails. I attended meetings. On the outside, life continued. On the inside, I was rehearsing conversations that had not happened. In my mind, I had already sat in front of my mother 100 times. Sometimes I shouted. Sometimes I cried. Sometimes I just sat there and watched her, waiting for her to break first. In all those rehearsals, one thing remained the same. I never walked out feeling lighter, because there is no version of this story where everybody leaves whole. One night, Ada's even beside me, tracing small circles on my arm. "Have you picked a day?" she asked. "Saturday," I replied. "Morning, before she can say she's going to market or church or meeting." "Do you want me to follow you?" she asked. I thought about it. Part of me wanted backup. Another part knew I needed to stand there alone. "Wait for me at home," I said. "If I break, let me come and break in front of you, not in front of the whole family." She nodded, eyes soft. "Whatever happens," she said, "remember this. You are not going there to beg her to love you. You are going to speak your truth. Whether she accepts it or not is her battle." I swallowed. "I hear you," I said. This time, I meant it. Saturday morning came like any other. The sun rose. People swept their compounds. Children shouted. Port Harcourt moved. I dressed simply. Jeans and a clean polo. No work shirt, no tie, no banker armor. On the drive to Urumu Okuta, my hands were sweating on the steering wheel. I replayed Uncle Biora's words, Ada's words, my own words. When I got to the street, the gate of our house was open. A small boy I didn't recognize was sweeping outside. He greeted me shyly. "Good morning, sir." "Morning," I replied. "Is mommy inside?" "Yes, sir, she is sweeping inside." I parked, inhaled deeply, and stepped out of the car. The compound was quiet. No party decorations, no music, just the normal sounds. Brooms on sand, distant generator, a radio playing gospel in a nearby compound. My mother was at the far end, near the back door, sweeping leaves into a pile. She wore a simple wrapper and a loose t-shirt. No gele, no makeup, no crowd. Just her and me. When she looked up and saw me, she froze for a second, then straightened slowly. "You," she said. Just that. Not Chidi, not my son. You. "Yes, ma," I replied.
For a moment, neither of us moved. She leaned on the broom slightly, watching me as if trying to guess why I had come. "Is everything all right?" she asked finally. The question almost made me laugh. "I don't know," I said. "That's partly why I'm here." She frowned. "You just came like that. You didn't call." "If I called, you might have been busy," I said. Her eyes narrowed a little at the edge in my tone. "Talk," she said. "I am listening." I looked around. "Can we sit?" I asked. "I don't want to talk standing under the sun." She hesitated, then nodded once. We went to the veranda. She placed the brew against the wall and sat on one plastic chair. I sat opposite her. For the first time in a long time, we were facing each other with no one else in the middle. No siblings, no church members, no visitors. Just mother and son. And 30 years. My heart was beating so loudly, I was sure she could hear it.
"Where do you want to start?" she asked, folding her arms across her chest. The posture was defensive, but her eyes were cautious, afraid even. I took a breath. "Uncle Obiora called us," I said, "me and Ada, at the hospital." Her fingers twitched, just once. "He said he didn't want to carry a secret to the grave," I continued, "so he told us a story." She looked away briefly, then back at me. "What story?" she asked, but her voice was already smaller. "The one that started with Dubem," I said, "and ended with me." Silence. Her jaw tightened. "You went to disturb a dying man," she said quietly. "You people don't have respect again." "With all due respect, Mama," I replied, "we didn't go to disturb him. He called us. He said he wanted to clear his conscience. So he told us about the engagement, the wedding in the village, the drinks, the night." Her face tightened at that word. I pressed on gently. He told us about the pregnancy, about the broken engagement, about the forced marriage, about the bitterness, about the way everything changed when I was born. Enough, she said sharply. Her voice cut through the air like a whip. I paused. She looked away, her hands gripping the arms of the chair. Who sent him? She muttered. Who asked him to open his mouth? Old man that doesn't know when to keep quiet. I swallowed. He said you asked him not to tell us, I said softly, that you preferred your children to think you were wicked instead of knowing the story. She closed her eyes briefly. Did he also tell you I begged God not to let you resemble him? She asked suddenly. The question stunned me. When I was pregnant with you, she continued, still not looking at me, I said, God, if you must bring this child into this world, at least don't make him look like the man who forced me. She gave a small broken laugh. God did not answer that prayer, she said. Every time I looked at your face, I saw his outline, his eyes, his mouth, his stubborn jaw. She turned to me then. And you are asking me why it was hard. I let her words sit between us. They hurt, but at least they were coming out of her mouth now, not only from other people's. Mama, I said quietly, what happened to you was evil. She flinched slightly. It was not your fault, I added. He took advantage of you. He destroyed your trust. He stole your future. You didn't deserve that. Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away angrily. Don't pity me, she said. I have survived. I am still standing. I'm not here to pity you, I replied. I'm here to tell you that your pain has been standing on my neck since I was a child. Our eyes met. For the first time in my life, I did not look away first. You are carrying a wound, but instead of treating it, you wrapped me around it like bandage. For 30 years. Her lips parted, but no words came out. When I was 6 and you didn't come on visiting day, I thought you forgot. I forgave you. When I was 12 and you dismissed my report card, I told myself you wanted me to do better. When I fell sick and you left medicine on the table while sitting by my brother's bed for small cough, I told myself, firstborns are strong. When you danced for Ada's job and told me only God is faithful for mine, I said, African mothers don't know how to show love. When you thanked the decorator at your birthday and skipped my name, I said nothing. I died quietly in my chair. My voice shook, but I kept going. I have been protecting you in my own head, making excuses, covering your nakedness, hiding your coldness behind culture and religion. But I was bleeding.
My mother's face hardened. So you came here to tell me I am a bad mother? She asked, her voice turning sharp. You, a small boy that doesn't know half of what I have seen. I expected that. No, I said calmly. I came to tell you that you hurt me. She laughed bitterly. Hurt you? She repeated. I carried you in my womb for 9 months. I vomited, I swelled, I nearly died. I sold my clothes to buy your books. I trekked to market with swollen legs. Your father was useless half the time. Who stood for you? Who prayed for you? Who cooked for you? Who washed your clothes? You did, I said. You did all of that. Then what are you saying? That because I didn't dance for you, I am now witch? Because I didn't pet you like baby, I now hate you? Her voice rose with each word. I didn't match her volume. Mama, I said softly, you gave me life, but you never made me feel wanted in it. She opened her mouth, closed it, then pointed at me. You young people, she said, you watch film, you read book, you now think you know what love is. In our time, love was action. Did you eat? Yes. Did you sleep under roof? Yes. Did you go to school? Yes. Then what again are you looking for? Warmth, affection, a sense that I was not a stranger in my own house. She shook her head. You are ungrateful, she muttered. That is what this generation is, ungrateful.
Her words stung, but they didn't knock me down like they used to. I had come too far to turn back now. I am grateful for everything you did, I said. I am not blind, but gratitude does not cancel pain. Two things can be true at the same time. She frowned. What two things? That you are a strong woman who sacrificed a lot, I said. And also that you are a wounded woman who wounded her first son. For a few seconds, she had no comeback. The veranda was quiet. Only the sound of a distant radio drifted in. You think it has been easy for me? She asked finally, her voice smaller. To wake up every day and see your face? There it was again. That knife disguised as confession. My chest tightened. And you think it has been easy for me? I replied. To wake up every day and see in your eyes that my existence is a problem you are trying to manage? We stared at each other. I didn't ask to be born, Mama. I didn't choose the night. I didn't choose the man. I didn't choose the story. But I have been paying for all of it. Her eyes glistened. I did the best I could, she whispered. Maybe, I said, but your best broke me. You know what's funny? I asked after a long pause. What? She replied, voice flat. All these years, I said, I wasn't even asking for much. I wasn't asking for car or land or blessing of millions. I just wanted one thing. What is that? She asked. A moment, I said. One moment where you would look at me and say, Chidi, I see you. You are my son. I am proud of you. Her eyes flickered. I don't know how to say those things, she muttered. You know how to say them to others, I replied gently. You know how to hug Ada and call her my daughter. You know how to laugh with the boys and call them my babies. You know how to stand in church and praise other people's children. I took a breath. It is only with me that your tongue becomes heavy. She looked away again. I didn't want you to be spoilt. Firstborn must be strong. If I had pampered you, you would not be where you are. I shook my head slowly. Mama, I became strong in spite of you, not because of you. My strength came from learning how to comfort myself when you wouldn't, from learning how to clap for myself when nobody clapped, from learning how to stand alone. I leaned forward slightly. But strong does not mean unbroken. It just means I learned how to walk with a limp. I could see something shifting on her face, not softening, not hardening, more like a door opening slightly, then closing again. I didn't know how to separate you from him, she said suddenly, voice barely above a whisper. Every time you smiled, I saw his smile. Every time you laughed, I heard his laugh. When you stood a certain way, it was like he was standing again. Do you know what that does to a woman? Tears rolled down her cheeks now. She didn't wipe them. I begged God, she said. I said, help me love this child. Help me not to throw my anger on him. Some days I succeeded. Many days I failed. She looked at me, eyes red. So yes, she said, maybe I was cold. Maybe I kept you at arm's length. Maybe I hugged others more than you. Maybe I forgot to say your name when I was thanking people. But you, her voice broke, you were never neutral to me. You were either too much or too close. I listened. Then I asked the question that had been burning inside me from the day I found out. Are you sorry? I asked quietly. She stared at me, not blinking, not breathing, just staring. For what? She asked. The answer crashed into my chest. For making a child pay for a man's sin. For letting trauma raise your first son, for never trying to heal only to hide, for turning me into a punishment you had to endure. She swallowed. I am sorry for what happened to me, she said slowly. I am sorry my life turned like that. I am sorry I didn't marry who I wanted. I am sorry I didn't get the future I deserved. She shook her head. But for how I survived, she added, for how I managed what I was given, for how I carried you and still stood, I don't know if I can be sorry for that. The air went still. She wasn't going to give me what I wanted. Not fully, not neatly,
Not today. Maybe not ever. Something inside me went quiet. Not peaceful, not dead, just quiet. I realized in that moment that I had come here with a secret hope, that if I explained myself well enough, if I opened my chest and showed her the scars, she would finally say the words that would stitch them closed. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I'll do better. Instead, what I got was, I did what I could. I don't know if I can be sorry for that. I sat back. So that's it, I asked softly. We will just continue like this? I don't know how to change 30 years in one day, she replied, sounding tired. I am not young like you. I don't know this your healing and therapy and talk about everything. I only know how to wake up and keep moving. I nodded slowly. Then I have to do what you never did, I said. What is that? She asked. Choose myself, I replied. Her eyes narrowed. What are you saying? I'm saying I cannot keep standing here year after year hoping you will become someone you don't even believe you can be, I said. I cannot keep bleeding in your name. Her fingers tightened again on the chair. So that is how you will repay me? With distance? I met her gaze. With survival, I corrected.
I stood up. My legs felt strange, but they were holding. She watched me, a storm of emotions on her face. Anger, hurt, pride, something like regret, but not quite. I'm not closing the door, I said gently. If you ever want to talk, really talk, not as deaconess, not as strong woman, but as a human being who was broken and wants to heal, you know my number. She looked away. I don't beg children, she muttered. I'm not asking you to, I said. I'm asking you to decide if you want to die with this wound or try to live without it. I took a deep breath. I forgive you, I said. Her head snapped back to me. For what? She demanded again. For all of it, I replied. For the things you did, for the things you didn't do, for the love you withheld, for the words you never said, for the way you let your pain choose me as target. She shook her head, almost offended. I don't need your forgiveness, she said. I know, I replied. It's not for you. We stared at each other for a few more seconds. Then I added softly, it's for me. I turned and walked toward the gate. She didn't call me back.
In the car, my hands were shaking. I rested my forehead on the steering wheel and finally let the tears come. Big, ugly, silent tears. Not just for what she did, for what she lived through, for what she never healed from, for what I had to grow up without. By the time I reached home, my eyes were dry, but my chest still felt raw. Adaize opened the door before I knocked. She took one look at my face and stepped aside without a word. I walked in, dropped my keys, and sat down heavily. Well, she asked softly. She is who she is, and I am who I have decided to be. Did she apologize? Adaize asked carefully. Not in the way I wanted, maybe not in the way I deserved. Do you regret going? She asked. I thought about it. I pictured her face when I said, you hurt me. I pictured my own face reflected in the window as I left. No, I said, I don't. What now? She asked. Now, I said slowly, I heal on purpose this time, not by accident. Therapy is not a magic wand. It doesn't erase 30 years in 3 sessions. But sitting in a small, quiet room across from someone who wasn't related to me, who wasn't defending my mother or attacking her, who was only interested in my truth, it was like learning a new language. The sentence, my mother doesn't love me, is heavy, the therapist said one day. Can we start with, my mother did not know how to love me in a way that felt safe and full. It didn't excuse her,
but it removed some poison from the words. We talked about inner child, boundaries, grief, acceptance. I talked and talked and talked. Years of silence poured out. Sometimes in the middle of work, I would feel a wave of sadness and step into the restroom to breathe through it. Other times, I would feel nothing, just a strange, quiet space where the old pain used to sit like a tenant. I called Ada often. We didn't always talk about Mama. We talked about work, food, random jokes. But every now and then, one of us would say, "Can you believe we lived through that?" And the other would answer, "We did, and we're still here."
2 months passed. No call from my mother. No missed calls. No, "Where are you?" One Sunday afternoon after church, my phone buzzed. A message. From her. I stared at the screen for a full minute before opening it. It was just 3 words. "How are you?" No emojis, no extra lines, no "from mom." Just, "How are you?" To someone else, it might have looked small. To me, it looked like a crack in a very thick wall. I didn't rush to answer. I sat with it for a while. Then I typed, "I am learning to be fine." I paused, deleted. Typed again, "I'm okay. Thank you for asking." I hit send. No smiley, no "God bless you." Just honest, simple words. She didn't reply, but for the first time, I didn't spin stories around her silence. I put the phone down and focused on the life I was building. One evening, I stood by my window and watched children playing in the compound. They shouted, fought, made up, shared biscuits. One little boy fell. He looked around, checking if anyone saw. His mother rushed out, wiped the sand from his knees and hugged him. He relaxed in her arms like it was the safest place in the world. I swallowed. "God," I whispered, "if you ever give me children, help me to love them loudly." Not perfectly, I know better than to expect that now, but loudly, I said. Not with distance, not with confusion, not with punishment for things they didn't do. I want to say their names with joy. I want to clap for them when they try, not only when they become first. I want them to know that even if the world rejects them, home will not join. My mother carried me for 9 months, but for 30 years, I carried the weight of a night I did not attend. Today, I put that weight down. I cannot change her story. I cannot rewrite how I came into this world, but I can decide how the story continues from me. And that is what I am doing now. One boundary, one honest conversation, one therapy session, one small reply to a 3-word message. I am not waiting for her to come and fix what she broke. I am building something new with my own hands, with my own heart, so that one day when my child asks, "Daddy, do I look like you?" I can smile, pull them close and say, "You look like someone who is wanted."